As an ex-software engineer, I quite understand some of the challenges that software engineers face while they are working with product managers. And as a product manager, I quite understand some of the frustration you might feel while you're working with software engineers. That's why in today's episode, I'm going to be talking about how to best work with software engineers as a product manager. Welcome to Product Thinking with Sheo. There seems to be an unending battle between software engineers and product managers. This is not supposed to be so, as product managers and engineers should be working together as a cohesive team to deliver quality products at the end of the day. Whilst I believe software engineers have their role to play in delivering quality products, I also believe PMs have a role to play in managing their software engineers. In today's episode, I'll be giving you tips on how to best work with software engineers, because software engineers are part of your stakeholders and a very important stakeholder if you need to be a successful product manager. So stay tuned while I give you tips on how to best work with software engineers. So tip number one I'm going to be giving you whilst working with software engineers is avoid ambiguity. Whilst working with software engineers, try to avoid ambiguity as much as possible. A lot of PMs take requirements to software engineers when the requirements has not been fully fleshed out with the stakeholders or with business. This is a very annoying thing to do to software engineers, right? I've been a software engineer before and I know it could be very annoying. When you take requirements to software engineers and changes and tweaks keep on coming from stakeholders, it frustrates the engineers, because when you give them requirements, they could have thought through the architecture and thought through the implementation in great detail, and coming to change the requirements very often sort of distorts their workflow. So you want to make sure that you're avoiding this as much as possible. One of the ways you can avoid this ambiguity is that you define the requirements with your stakeholders. Make sure it's clear, right? As a rule of thumb, tell yourself that you never take requirements to the software engineers if you've not clearly defined it with your stakeholders or with your business. Make up your mind that you only take it to the software engineers when the requirements are clearly and fully defined. And this should reflect in the way you write your user stories. You want to make your user stories as detailed as possible. A lot of PMs don't write user stories. A lot of PMs don't write detailed user stories. Your user stories, I believe, should contain about 3 to 4 things. Number one, it should contain the case study. In your user story, you want to talk about why you are building the product or why you are building that particular feature, so that the engineers can follow the thought process as to why that feature is being built. Next up is the story itself. Now this is where you write things like, as a user, I want to be able to log in, blah blah blah. You know what I'm talking about. So next up is the story itself. Then, having written the story itself, the next thing you want to write is the requirements. Now this is where you need to get as detailed as possible. In the requirements for your user stories, you want to talk about all the edge cases that you want software engineers to cover, right? A lot of engineers might tell you they don't know that they have to cover certain edge cases if you don't say it to them. Senior engineers might cover some of the use cases that you might not even talk about in your ticket because of the years of experience that they have. But you want to make sure that your user stories deals deep into the requirements that you want software engineers to cover. Then other things you can include in your requirements could be minor details like the user experience, how it should work, a user flow or a flow chart of how a particular feature should work. Then you can also include things like Figma design, a prototype, engineering requirements and whatnot. I think as a product manager, you should actually learn how to write very detailed user stories for your engineers. You also want to make sure that you have a roadmap so that engineers can see the list of features to expect in the future. This way you give engineers a sense of ownership. You also give them a sense of what to expect so that they'll begin to envision the problem for the future. So tip number one, avoid ambiguity as much as possible as a product manager while you're working with software engineers. As much as possible as a product manager, try to avoid burnout for your team. Burnout is a way to quickly lose emotional touch with your software engineers. Do all you can to avoid burnout and make sure that you are communicating this to your software engineers. When your software engineers know that you are doing your best to avoid burnout, they are going to emotionally connect with you. There are a lot of things you could do or not do as a product manager to avoid burnout. Are you communicating clearly with your stakeholders and with the software engineers? Are you clearly defining requirements? Are you pushing back where necessary? Are you taking up more than the engineering team can deliver per time? You want to make sure that you are looking into yourself and into your processes to make sure that burnout is avoided as much as possible. Whilst burnout might not be totally taken out of the picture, especially in a startup environment, there are a couple of things that you could do as a PM that could help you avoid burnout. Those things you want to make sure that you're doing them. You can read up on some of the things you could do to avoid burnout online, right? That's not the discussion for this video. I might actually make another video now to avoid burnout, but just make sure that you are avoiding burnout for your team as much as possible. And this is going to lead me to tip number 3. So wait for it. Tip number 3, learn to advocate for your software engineering team. The business team of your organization and your stakeholders or your boss will always have requirements. They want everything delivered at the same time. As a PM, you should know when to push back. As a PM, you should know when to say no. As a PM, you should know when to negotiate. Your software engineers should be able to trust you. When engineers know that they can trust you to be able to manage conversation with your stakeholders, trust me, they will go above and beyond for you. There was a situation where the stakeholders wanted the software engineers to come to a physical location to work together. Well, I discussed with the stakeholders because I knew that a lot of the software engineers wanted to work remotely at the time. So I discussed with the stakeholders, letting them know how we could deliver our work remotely, and I even volunteered to meet at a physical location at one of the days. That single action I took just won the loyalty of the engineering team to me, right? I just won over the hearts of everybody, and I remember one of the software engineers telling me that he owes me one and he's ready to repay back in some way in the future. Of course, he's yet to repay back. Probably owes me a bottle of drink, but you get the point. The point is, you want to make sure that your software engineers can trust you to advocate for them. Your software engineers should be able to trust you to say no and push back where necessary. Tip number 4, be agile. Make sure you are adopting agile methodologies for your team. A lot of teams are not agile. Agile is going to do you a whole lot of good. It's going to help you, it's going to help the stakeholders, it's going to help the software engineers. Agile allows everybody follow a defined way of working, right? Everybody knows what to do and there's no chaos all over the place. I wrote an article, Agile of Fragile. So a lot of teams are very fragile. They are not agile, right? I'm going to drop the link in this video. Try to read up the article, and once you read up the article, you could actually try to gauge if your team is agile or if your team is fragile. Tip number 6, make the team lead your body, make the team lead your best friend of the team, right? This is going to save you a whole lot of stress. It's going to save you a lot of stress. There are a lot of good that this could do for you. If there's a situation where a particular software engineer is not meeting up, or the software engineer is stressing you out, and you find it difficult to have that tough conversation with the engineer, just putting it on the table of the team lead is a good way to try to get issues resolved with an engineer that you might be having issues with. So this is what I do on my team. Every week I sort of have a one-on-one call with the team lead of my engineering team, and what we just do is to catch up on how the team is doing. I get to give him some insider information as to what we might be planning on the product side or on the business side. He gets to tell me what is happening on the engineering side. It's just sort of a way of catching up. You might not be able to do a one-on-one call with your team lead every week. You could decide to do yours bi-weekly, but I'll strongly advise that you come up with a structure that helps you to build a bond with the team lead, because building a bond with the team lead is going to help you resolve a whole lot of issues faster. Tip number 7, be empathic and try to show people that you really care. Don't just make them feel that you need them to deliver a feature and you're going to throw them out the window once they are done delivering the feature. Show that you really care. Wish them a happy birthday. Ask them how they are doing. Ask them about their plans for the weekend. Ask them how their weekend went. Wish them a happy birthday. Send them gifts if need be, or if you can. I know a lot of us are working remotely, so that might be difficult to do, but just imagine you really gift to someone, and it's going to really win that person's heart over. Show that you care. Send them helpful materials that might help them advance in their career and whatnot. Just generally show that you care. People will build that emotional bond with you if they know that you truly care about them. This is just a bonus point. Make sure that you're involved in the onboarding process of a new software engineers. When a new software engineer joins your team, don't just leave them don't leave them to the hands of the engineering team alone. Make sure that you're involved in the onboarding process. There's this phrase they usually say when I was in university. They'll say catch them young. So when a new software engineer joins your team, you want to make sure that you're part of the onboarding process and you're speaking with them and you're building that bond at a very early stage. It's really going to go a long way to help you while you're working with engineers generally. I hope this video was helpful and you learned a thing or two. If you think this video was really great, like, comment and share to your network, and also feel free to tell me what topics you want me to discuss in the future. Thanks for listening, and see you in the next episode.